Over the last couple of days, our local health unit has come out with a recommendation that our migrant farm workers in Norfolk ought to carry an ID card. And this ID card would have their name, it would have the farmer's name, it would have the date that they arrived in the country, and essentially the card would serve as proof that they'd served their quarantine period, that they're not a threat to the rest of us. Now this, on so many levels, raises red flags for me. I guess my first response would be, if this is a good idea, this ID card, surely it's a good idea for every single one of us. Because I know a number of white folks who have recently returned to the country from Arizona, from Florida, from the Caribbean. They've been out traveling and they've come back. And yet we're not asking them to carry any kind of an ID card. So that's my first thing that I notice. We seem to be applying this to the people of color, those people who look a little bit different than us. And it's not the only way in which we segregate them. I noticed soon after coming to town about 3.5 years ago, there are a number of stores that have a no backpack policy, so you can't have a backpack in the store. They're worried about shoplifters. However, nobody says anything when I walk around with a bag. But if you see a Mexican or a black person with a bag, it's interesting that the employees will actually come and say, no, you gotta leave your bag here. And they follow them around the store, as if they're about to steal something. There's a suspicion there of the other. And it's kind of funny because it actually flies right in the face of all the facts that we see and that we know. My wife, for a little while, she worked at a downtown store helping out a woman there when her husband died. And her experience was that the migrants were the best customers because you didn't have to worry about the migrants stealing. You didn't have to worry about them mistreating the person behind the counter. It was actually the Norfolk residents that would do that. And the reason for that is quite simple, that these migrants come and they do jobs that we don't want to do. It's hard work and it doesn't pay enough for us to do it. But for them, it's good. It helps support their families. And most of these people that come, it's the same folks year after year. Now, if they have any kind of trouble with the law, they're sent home and they don't come back. They lose their livelihood. So it's actually quite a big deal. So for them, they really want to keep their noses clean. So they tend to be actually more law-abiding and more polite in many ways than the rest of us have to be, because we take it for granted that we're here, and nothing's going to change that. And also, as I work in a downtown church, we have folks all the time coming to the door who are looking for help, looking for handouts. Not once has there been a black person, a Mexican person, an Asian person, or any person of color show up at the front door of the church, all twitching and twitching on meth, asking for help, right? The migrants are not a threat. The migrants are not a problem, although we seem to think that they are because they look different. Well, one other fact I want to throw at you, I looked up this morning the rates of infection in various countries around the world. So now these are cases per million, right? So this is not a straight number, but it's a ratio. Now, when we compare Canada to Mexico, Canada has 6.5 times the infection rate that Mexico does. Canada has 10 times the infection rate that Jamaica does. Canada has 22 times the infection rate that Trinidad and Tobago does. Now, these are the three countries that most of our migrant workers come from. So rather than them being a threat to us, as a matter of fact, when they walk our streets, they're putting themselves at risk. They have much more risk of catching the disease here than at home. So it's rather interesting that they come and do the work we don't want to do for the pay that we don't want to have, and they put themselves at risk. And then we look at them as the other, and we think that they're a problem. There's something terribly wrong here. So when we read the Bible, it tells us very clearly how we're supposed to treat the stranger, the alien. Exodus 22, do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt. Exodus 23, do not oppress a foreigner, or you yourself, because you yourselves know how it feels to be foreigners. You were foreigners in Egypt. Leviticus 19, when a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. Numbers 15, I like this one. The community is to have the same rules for you and for the foreigner residing among you. This is a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. You and the foreigner shall be the same before the Lord. Deuteronomy 10, love the foreigner, therefore, for you are foreigners in the land of Egypt. Deuteronomy 24, do not take advantage of a hired worker who is poor and needy, whether that worker is a fellow Israelite or a foreigner residing in one of your towns. When we move into the New Testament, Jesus talks about loving your neighbor. And of course, the response of the man that he was talking to, he said, well, who is my neighbor? But really the easier question to ask maybe is, who isn't my neighbor? Everybody is your neighbor. Jesus also, he was speaking about the separation of the sheep and the goats, of the good from the bad. And when he was explaining it, he said, I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty. You gave me something to drink. And the people responded and they said, what are you talking about, Jesus? We never fed you. We never gave you anything to drink. But he said, as much as you do such things for the very least among you, you are doing those things to me. So whatever we do to the least among us, right, to those people who maybe have less rights or less opportunities, certainly less citizenship in this country that we do, whatever we're doing to the least of those, we're doing to Jesus. So when I think about this ID card idea, we can do better. Norfolk, we have to do better.